Welcome back to Blueprint for Wealth. I'm Wayne Zell, and you're listening to our special guest segment with Ben Edson. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wayne.
Ben started up a company called VariQ. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep, VariQ like barbecue.
Right. VariQ like barbecue. And VariQ is a government contractor, and they're located in the DC metro area, but we'll talk a little bit about that, but tell us, how did you get to starting that business? Where did you come from? What's your background? What was the impetus?
Yeah, well, so it seems like a lifetime ago since the company was started in 2003 with just myself. I had been working with Symantec Professional Services for about 3 years, and like everybody, I wanted to grow in career, and so I posted my resume on monster.com, and as is the case with a lot of GovCon, someone found my resume and said, hey, we'd like to use it in a bid. I'm like, okay, I didn't know what they were talking about, and sure enough, they won, right? So I landed at the U.S. Senate as the contract. It was just me as a solution architect, and from there, 6 months in, I kind of identified that the company that had brought me in was just a staffing firm. They weren't,
right.
Their depth wasn't in cyber. I had come from Symantec, where I'd been traveling the country doing technical installations for Coca-Cola, Aetna, Bank of Mexico, and here I'm landing with essentially a staffing company. So I formed VariQ and subcontracted to a large vendor at the time, and that's how it got started.
Cool.
But before then,
then
I grew up kind of uniquely. I was born in Italy, grew up largely in Argentina, so I came to the States somewhat like an immigrant. I was 18 years old when I landed in Miami with $20 in my pocket and clothes that fell out of my suitcase as we were coming off a conveyor belt because my brother and I had stuffed the only suitcase we had with duct tape, and so it's one of those stories of welcome to America and make the best of it. My parents were missionaries. I have 14 other siblings, so you could imagine we all had to make our own way in some form or another.
What number are you?
I'm number 2.
Wow. 2 of 14. Well, today we're going to try to we have 3 takeaways that we want to leave our audience with, and you're going to help us fill in the gaps on this. One is, how do you build a business from scratch like VariQ and make it so successful? And 2, what are the biggest challenges that you face? So you're going to tell us a little bit about that. And then number 3, some advice for our young entrepreneurs out there who are listening to the video cast. That background is fascinating. Did you all speak English as a family?
So in Europe, as a kid, we were in France, and amongst ourselves we spoke French, and then to the parents we spoke in English, because my parents were American. In Argentina, we spoke English, so we always spoke the English language. We speak fluent Spanish today. I speak fluent Spanish today. I've forgotten all my French.
It won't be that hard to learn it. I'll bet you if you spend some time over there, you'll be able to get it back.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about VariQ. I mean, I get how the staffing deal didn't work out. You started your own business. It's hard to build a successful business from scratch. If you had to tell us, what are the keys to the success that you've been able to generate?
So today we're about 300 employees, and we've won some big contracts. We've outgrown in the GovCon what's considered a small business, and we've had our portfolio of business turned over pretty much 1 year to the next, right? So in 2020, we were 80% small business still with the book of business. Today, we're 80% unrestricted, which is for large businesses. So our competition is only large businesses. But in starting off, I think I formed VariQ when I was 28. And before then, I had a little bit of business background. I did budgets for some of our missionary centers. I did a lot of buying and selling on eBay. I started a real estate company to try to build a house. So always kind of figuring out where the angle is to actually make money, how to make money. So it's important to figure out how to be profitable, right? Because that reduces a lot of stress. VariQ was always profitable. We always figured out how to find good people at a cost and then increase that cost in what we sold so you could create margin, right? At 28 years old, there's not a lot of connections that you have. I definitely didn't have any in the GovCon industry. So you're kind of learning as you go. But at the core, I was an engineer, right? Engineers are very there's a lot of demand in high tech, in any tech. Cybersecurity, there's a lot of demand. So I was billable and working all the time. And then you have to figure out how to maximize yourself through others. And at some point, that is then the hardest next step. How do you manage people? How do you recruit people? How do you convince them that they should work with you or for you? How do you maintain dependability so that you're always paying your bills? They trust you to look after them just as much. Once you have that foundation, then it's scale. The scale is tough. One of the things in commercial with Symantec, they were always doing 7-day projects to 12-day projects to 14. And there's this thing called utilization where sometimes you were working, sometimes you weren't. And half the time they were always saying that they were unprofitable because utilization was a challenge. The beauty of GovCon is it's tough, but you win these 1-year contracts, 5-year contracts, so it creates a lot of stability. It might be tough to win them, but once you do, it creates a foundation that then you could build on that is not dependent on utilization. So once you have those foundations, then you have a very stable business that then you could grow off of. So I would say stay away from little endeavors that keep you turning your wheels, and try to go after something that is stable, and then from that stability, that'll give you time to figure out how to grow.
Something triggered in my mind as you were talking. I was thinking, you came into this business really not having any connections in the government or any experience with government contracting except for the initial staffing job I guess you worked on with the U.S. Senate. How did you build those connections? How did you build do the business development to grow the business to where it is today?
So I had spent 5 years at the Senate before trying to get 1 person, 2 people, and I was billing also myself full time, and it was very, very difficult. I'd never seen what a bid looked like, what a proposal looked like. I had no idea that this world had small business set-asides. So but I had a lot of passion, right, for changing and improving the area that I was in. That passion ultimately led me to propose a concept for cybersecurity consolidated services that earn the respect of the CIO, earn the respect of managers, earn the respect of other vendors that were inside of the Senate. And when we competed for what became a contract and lost, so we actually, out of that concept, I teamed with a big company, Lockheed Martin. They were not selected. The Senate chose a cheaper solution vendor, but that experience allowed me to then create freedom of mobility, right? And then from there, I connected with Lockheed, I connected with General Dynamics, I connected with other very, very large vendors that saw the entrepreneurial spirit that I had, and they gave me an option or an opportunity to then staff some of their programs. And the rest is just learning, right? How do you create a non-disclosure agreement? How do you create a teaming agreement? How do you create an employment agreement. I honestly just went to Office Depot at the time and took down forms, and we kept those forms for 10 years until finally lawyers told us to tighten them up a little bit. And so when you don't know much, you do what you can with what you have. The learning aspect is invaluable because as we've gone after bigger programs, working directly with the government, then there's a whole regulatory layer that gets put on top. So you have to surround yourself with good folks. VariQ was never built through deep connected relationships. We took the approach of maximum competition, right? So an opportunity would come out. We thought we were good technically at solutioning and delivering. We would go after it, even though we didn't have all the best connections. That also meant we failed a lot because it wasn't for us, or they had someone else. But we learned a lot.
But you had the competence.
And it gave us the
capability.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. I mean, one of the things that I noticed also, with VariQ is what you just mentioned was that you went from 80% small business to 80% free, full and open, which for government contractors is probably the biggest challenge transitioning from small business. How did you do it so quickly in 1 year?
So I wish we had a super magical formula. We just had 70% of our work recompeted in 2019. We had won some significant contracts in 2014, and those contracts, they all kind of came to a cycle in 2019, which forced 70% of our work to be recompeted.
Okay.
We had been competing for work all along, right? Because VariQ was never an 8A. We never got sole sources. We always competed for our work, so we knew how to put in a lot of proposals. And one of the key things that we had done over the years is we were very successful on these IDIQs or GWACs, the big umbrella contracts that the government puts out. And that of those umbrella contracts, then they issue task orders. So we had a fairly robust suite of IDIQs, and every year we've won one or two significant contracts since that 2019, and that allowed us we recaptured some of our work. So in 2019 we had 70% of our work recompeted. 2020 we landed winning a percentage of that work, and then we also won new work. And in addition, in 2020, I actually made an acquisition, right? So we, right out of COVID, in June, we closed on a company called Rivet Logic. They provide digital experience, and that replenished also some of the business that we had lost from a shrinking year in our own prime work. So the combination allowed us to make that flip both organically and inorganically, and recapturing some of that work that we had. So it was a very tough year.
What I'm hearing, it was tough, but what I'm hearing is you used your competence in the technical areas and combined that with your proposal process and really understanding how to go after the work that enabled you to succeed in something that most people do not, which is, that's wonderful, wonderful. Let me ask you another question. Getting to the second point, if you had to tell us about the biggest challenge that you've faced since starting VariQ, what would that be?
The biggest challenge is people, right? So we're a services company. We're not a product company. Yes. In a product company, the beauty is you have a core of engineers that love what they do. They see the vision, and then you get an ecosystem of salespeople that then go sell that singular idea as many times over as you can. In a services company, every person is unique and they bring strengths and weaknesses, and you can't just cookie cutter an engineer to the next engineer, or cloud engineer, or cyber. They're all different, right? So in the people business, the biggest challenge is usually attracting people that want to stay. The second is making sure that you have a meaningful wage to where they want to stay. The third is creating a culture of inclusion to where they feel that you care about them. That's also fairly tough. And then ultimately, there's the mission portion, right? People want to have meaningful work. They don't just want busy work. And fortunately for us in high end, it's fairly challenging, right? Moving an application to the cloud is challenging. Securing an environment from all the threats is challenging. So on that side, the missions that we serve and the type of work that we do is very mentally engaging. So that helps us attract talent. But keeping people is always a challenge. And at one point, I had 6 Edsons working in the company. There is,
Well, there's a whole bunch more than 6.
there's a whole bunch more,
14.
but there can be Edson fatigue, right? So people can work with each other for a period of time, and then they usually want to do something else, or they no longer are challenged, or they no longer can grow, and so they move on. So today there's fewer Edsons in the company than historically, but that is the most challenging, the people aspect. I've enjoyed the 17-year history of being part of VariQ and leading VariQ, but having people along the way that, for better or worse, lasted 5 years or 7 years or 6 months or 1 year, that always is something that I wonder about, right? How do you engage someone that lasts for a long, long period of time? And that's tough.
That's been my biggest challenge as an entrepreneur.
It's very difficult.
What advice would you give a young entrepreneur who's starting their business?
So focus on the things that you're good at. Make sure that the things that you're good at actually produce a meaningful wage. So from a productivity perspective, I think it's important to, if you want to build a family, if you want to have disposable income, if you want to have those things that help you get ahead, focus on a career path that is not just based off of your passion, but that has a real need within the marketplace. So that's one. The second thing that I would encourage is think of learning as something that is eternal. And the areas that you're not super comfortable, whether it's business or finance or HR or people, those try to complement yourself in those areas as well, because as an entrepreneur, you're going to need all of those aspects to be successful.
Great advice. This is great advice. We've been talking with Ben Edson, who's CEO at VariQ, and we've learned how he built his business from scratch. We talked about the challenge of keeping good people, and then lastly, he gave us some really good advice for new entrepreneurs as well as old entrepreneurs who are trying to build their businesses. And we really, really are very grateful to you, Ben, for being on Blueprint for Wealth.
No problem. Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks for being a special guest on Blueprint for Wealth, and join us next time for another educational moment and another special guest. Have a great week.
Thanks.